Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to another one of our lectures in our series of lectures in our Saturday mornings. Today we have a different format. We're actually going to have two speakers. We're going to have Dr. Paulo Bispo and Dr. Rafael Rezende. They're going to be talking to us about the role of the spiritual body in health and disease. A very, very interesting topic and a topic for reflection for us as we start a new year, as we start a new cycle. So let me talk a little bit about our two lectures for today. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Thank you so very much for being with us. So, Dr. Paulo Bispo, he's a medical microbiologist trained in infectious diseases research at the Federal University of São Paulo in Brazil, the University of Miami School of Medicine, and Harvard Medical School. He is currently an academic scientist in Boston and an active and contributing member of the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts and the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association. Dr. Rafael Rezende is a pharmacist and biochemist with a master's degree and PhD in pharmacology from Federal University of Minas Gerais, Brazil, with two postdoctoral fellowships in immunology, one from the Federal University of Minas Gerais and another one from Harvard Medical School. He's currently assistant professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School in Bremen and Women's Hospital. So, gentlemen, again, it's a very interesting topic. We're all eager, and my understanding is that each one of you is going to start do a presentation about 20 minutes, and then you're going to have a discussion, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. As always, let's clear our minds. Let's get ready for our initial prayer. And in this moment, we ask for inspiration from the spiritual world for our lectures, but also inspiration for us so that we might see the importance of our spiritual body, the importance of our thoughts, importance of our actions, and the way we can become better people, healthier people, not only from a physical standpoint, but also from an emotional, mental, spiritual, even societal standpoint. Help us put into practice everything, teachings like these, and everything else that Spiritism teaches us, so that we can become better individuals and progress faster. So be it.
So be it. All right, so I think we're ready to start. Ready, Rafael?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so I'm glad to be here with you and everybody who is joining us today as well. Welcome. And very glad to discuss the role of the spiritual body in disease and health. I think, this is a very fascinating topic for me to understand the nature, the functions of the spiritual body, and how our spirit, the mental body, the spiritual body are all connected to our biology, all connected to our physical body. Because I think, the more we understand about those connections, the more we understand about all the dimensions that we are, all the multiple dimensions that we live as reincarnated spirits, I think that helps us a lot to make better choices in life and live a better life with more health, with more happiness. So I'm very excited to be here and have Rafael as well to discuss on the role of the spiritual body in disease and health here today with us. What we're going to do before we actually discuss about the spiritual body, I think it would be interesting to just quickly introduce the topic and discuss other things that I think are important for our meeting today and for our discussions later. And that's something that I'm going to do first. What I want to do is to just, quickly talk about the definition of health, what we understand by being health. And I think we can go back to the scientific definition of that, and also how the spiritist philosophy understand what it is to be healthy. We can also discuss why the spirit, the mind, which is an attribute of the spirit, and thus as well the spiritual body influence our biology and influence our health status. And then Rafael is going to talk about the nature and functions of the spiritual body. We're going to have, after the two presentations, a short discussion and open for discussions with the public as well. So to start that conversation, I just wanted to go back to the definition of health. And if we look at the World Health Organization definition, which was published in 1946, it states that health is a complete physical, is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So this is very interesting because, back then, already in 1946, our colleagues, physicians, and scientists, they came up with this definition of health that includes other things other than only the physical body, other than only our biology. And they understand that there is an intersection of biology and our mental states, our mind, and also our social well-being, because we're definitely social animals. We're thinking constantly, and all of these different dimensions, they influence our biology because they're all interconnected. And we now know that our thoughts, our mind, can influence our health. So this is something that we've been learning more and more in psychosomatic medicine, which is a field of medicine that studies the mechanism by which the psyche, or the mind, the thoughts, can influence the soma, the body, the physical body, and how they're linked. And now we know that there's a lot of different psychological and psychosocial stressors that can influence our health because they influence the function of very, very central and fundamental systems in our body. That includes the neural system, the brain, which is coordinating pretty much all the functions in our body through nervous impulses. Then we have the endocrine system as well, that is controlling all the metabolism at a chemical level, not at the electric level as the brain. And at the chemical level, the endocrine system is producing a lot of hormones that are very key as well to control all the metabolism. And both of these systems that are very central to our life and existence, they also coordinate the response of the immune system. Another system that is also very key and central in our lives, because without an immune system, we would be sick all the time, infected all the time, and probably not live as long as we live right now. So all of these different systems are connected, are fundamental to our biology, and they can be influenced by social and psychological stressors. That's what we've been learning from psychosomatic medicine research. And when we look at the list of disease, I just wanted to summarize that, how the psychosocial stressors in life can influence our health, and look at this list. So pretty much all the diseases that we can develop in our physical body: infectious disease, autoimmune disease because of the immune system, the influence in the immune system, cancer, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndromes like hyper glucose levels or cholesterol levels, mental illnesses, and also aging and lifespan. So psychological and social stressors touch on our lives in many different aspects and in many different sorts of disease as well. And there is, in all of these different diseases, a psychosocial component, and that's what we've been learning from psychosomatic medicine. But what we understand as being health from the Spiritist philosophy. So do we understand that being health is also being psychologically health, being socially health, and biologically healthy as well? It is, but there is definitely an additional component when we look at the Spiritist philosophy. And if we go back to Emmanuel in a book called O Consolador, I don't think there's a translation for this book. I think right now it's only in Portuguese. Questions 95 and 96, Emmanuel says this, that health is the perfect harmony of the spirit. Okay, so he takes that control of everything that is happening in our body, that everything that is happening with the biology. He takes that control and he puts that control in the spirit. If we don't have a spirit that is healthy, that is in harmony, there is no health, right? We are not healthy when our spirits are not healthy as well. So he goes on to say that all diseases of the soul, all imperfections of the spirit manifest in the physical body. And that the pathogenesis, that means the way that disease develop in our body, results from an aggregation of problems in the psyche, in the mind. He actually used another word. So this is just a free translation because there is no formal translation. He used another word that in Portuguese, he says inferioridades or inferiorities, right, of the spirit, or imperfections of the spirit. And that all this aggregation of imperfections of the spirit can result in problems in our mind. And Rafael is going to talk, I think, a little bit about the mind being an attribute of the spirit and forming something that André Luiz calls this the mental body, which reflects in the spiritual body. So they're all interconnected. So the psyche is an attribute, the mind, the psyche is an attribute of the spirit. It forms the mental body. And by reflection, it also reflects in the spiritual body and in our physical body as well. So that's why Emmanuel says that if our spirit is not healthy, there is no healthy body as well. There is no healthy soma. There's no healthy biology. So that's very interesting because that, changes a little bit the way that we think about etiology of disease. We can definitely identify a bunch of etiologies of many diseases by running lab tests, for example, that we can find aggressors like bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, or we can find imbalances in our hormones, or we can find problems with our immune system and inflammation. All of these are just expressions of what is happening in the spirit, right? All of this is just an expression of what is happening in the mind, in the psyche as well, in the spiritual body, that then manifest in the physical body. So I think that's a nice definition because we can definitely, I think put together both definitions from science and from Emmanuel together and understand all of these multiple dimensions that we exist in. We are spirits that are incarnated in a material world. So because of that, of course, the biology is also important. The physical world is also important, but we cannot forget that we are primarily spirits, and everything that we bring here in terms of memories, of spiritual memories, imperfections in our spirit, they're going to manifest in the physical body. So in the book Evolution in 2 Words, that was dictated by the spirit André Luiz says that the human mind, or the psyche, controls almost all functions of the body. And that's very interesting because the body is just a collection of a bunch of very small units of life that we call cells, right? So when we think about the spirit controlling all the functions of the body, we have to think that the spirit is in direct contact with all the cells, all the trillion cells that form our tissues, our systems, our organs, and our bodies, right? And he says that the human mind proceeds to manage the process of metabolism. in its organization and adaptation. So that means that the human mind controls the function of all the cells in our bodies. If the human mind or the spirit controls all the functions in our body, it's fair to say that we're controlling all the functions down to the cellular level and molecular level as well. And in another part of the same book, André Luiz goes to say that the intelligence, or the spirit, the mind, influence our cells, okay, through the cytoplasm. So that's the large portion of the cell where we have all the organelles. That's basically a combination of water and a bunch of proteins. And then he says that the intelligence influencing the cytoplasm ultimately is the element, the interstitial element of connection for the psychosomatic forces. So he's saying that interaction between the psyche and the soma, that interaction between the spirit, the mind, and our biology, our physical bodies and our cells, it happens at the cellular level. So that means that our spirit is connected cell to cell with every cell in our bodies. That's very interesting. And that's why, of course, if the spirit is not functioning well, if the spirit is connected to all the cells in our bodies and influence the cell biology, influence the function of our cells through a interaction with the cytoplasm, it can definitely lead to many different consequences. If the mental states that we're forming in our mental body are positive, the influence of the mental state is going to be positive in the cells as well. But if it's a negative one, well, that influence is also going to be negative. And then downstream consequence is going to be modifications in the functions. If we modify the function of our cells, that can lead to different disease sometimes. Sometimes some of those modifications can be asymptomatic, right? We're going to discuss that a little bit later. But sometimes those modifications can also influence our health and disease status. So in the same book, he then defines cells, which is a very interesting, I think, definition of cells. And I'm already finishing this introduction. And I wanted to talk about this because that raised the question of, you know, what forces are actually organizing everything that is happening in our body. Our bodies are highly, highly organized, right? We have trillions and trillions and trillions of cells that know exactly what to do, that know exactly what their functions are, know exactly what molecules, what proteins, what enzymes they have to produce. And as we saw before in the same book, André Luiz says that they know how to make those proteins. They know how to make those molecules. They know who they are, what kind of cells they are, and the functions they have to express by an information that comes from the spirit. So André Luiz says that because of that, the cells are domesticated units of life. They are domesticated and organized in the organic hive. And the domestication comes from the mind and from the spirit. So the mind and the spirit is telling the cells what they need to do or not. But it also has a level of organization that is fascinating, actually, because just think about it. It's just matter, right? It's just a bunch of mass of matter that is highly organized. And just to give you an example, that is a very simple one, actually. Think about the organization of the human cornea. When André Luiz says that the cells take on different forms according to the situation of the individual and the nature of the tissues in which they're grouped. So look at the differences that we have here in the human cornea. It's a very simple tissue. It's very thin. That the cornea is the transparent tissue in the anterior segment of our eyes. We like to call that the windows to the world, because the cornea helps us to take all the information, take all the light, and bring that to the back of the eye, to the retina, and that goes to the brain to form images. So the cornea is that very simple tissue that does all of that. But look at the organization of the cornea. you have, and here's just a diagram, and here you have an actual microscopic picture of the cornea. So it has a couple of different layers of epithelial cells, right, on the top of the cornea. Here's the top of the cornea, okay? And here's the back of the eye. So it has a couple of layers that are really, really, really important, because the cornea, as you can see here, has no blood vessels, okay? A good chunk of the eye, the internal parts of the eye, has no immune response as well, because, and we call that immune privilege organ, because even small responses to aggressors could lead to damage to the retina, and that results in blindness. So there is no blood vessels here. There's not a lot of immune responses going on. So this tissue here is responsible to protect the whole eye, basically. This tissue here, only 4 or 5 layers, produce a lot of antimicrobial molecules that protect our whole eye, the whole eyeball, the external parts, and also the internal parts. So they know what they need to do. They know those molecules that they need to express. They express a bunch of molecules that we call transmembrane mucins that form, we don't see that here in this picture, but form a very beautiful layer of molecules that actually becomes a barrier to the invasion of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microbes. And they're very organized. They know how they need to polarize there, how they need to be in the 3-dimensional form, right? And all the molecules that they have to express. Then we have the thicker layer of the cornea, which is basically a combination of some cells that produce collagen. Collagen is transparent. Collagen gives the cornea let's call that the skeleton of the cornea. It keeps the cornea, it gives the shape of the cornea, right? And those cells are producing that. So look at the difference of these cells and these cells. They're very different, but they're also very organized. And what is very interesting is that all those collagen fibers are very organized as well, in a way that keeps the shape of the cornea correct, so that the refraction works well. When we don't have that portion here, and some people don't have that portion here correct, we can develop something called keratoconus. So keratoconus means that your cornea is pointy and the refraction is not correct, because the collagen fibers are not organized well. In a healthy cornea, the collagen fibers are very well organized. How they know to organize that way? How those cells here, how to know to be organized in that way as well? How this other part here, which is the endothelium, know how to transfer all the nutrients from the internal part of the eyes, because again, the cornea is not vascularized, so there's no blood influx here. That means there's no nutrients, but those cells need to survive. They need nutrients to survive and replicate. So all of that is being done by this part here. So each of these layers have different functions, and each one of them are organized in different ways. How those cells, and that's just, again, a simple example. There are other tissues highly organized like this and much more complex. How are they organized like that? If the spirit-mind information, if the cells are domesticated by the spirit and by the mind, they know what they need to do because the spirit and the mind is telling them what to do. How that information is actually transferred from the spirit to the body, because the spirit is immaterial and the body is material. How that connection happens, right? The mind is also immaterial. We cannot touch that. We cannot see that. We can touch ourselves, we can touch our tissues and our bodies. How can one immaterial substance or one immaterial entity touch a material one? Or how can the mind and the spirit that is immaterial influence our bodies that are material? You have to have something in between, and something that has the two properties, something that can be material, but also not material, okay? And there's something in between the immaterial world, the spirit and the mind, the mental body, and the physical world. Kardec called that perispirit, or the spiritual body, as Andrello called it. So Kardec said that the spirit, due to its spiritual essence, it's an unlimited abstract being, which can have no direct action upon matter, something that we just said here. So there should be an intermediary, right, between something that is immaterial and the matter that is material. So this envelope he designated the perispirit, or the spiritual body. And then he says that from an abstract being, this envelope makes of the spirit a concrete, defined being, seized by the thought. So that means that our bodies are actually seized by our thoughts. We are constructing our biology. We are constructing our bodies with the spiritual body that we form based on our thoughts, on our mental body, and all the information that we're bringing with us in our spirit. And that the perispiritual fluid is then the bond between spirit and matter. Okay, so I hope that with this short introduction, we're able to convey to you that the spirit is directly influencing the function of our bodies down to the cellular and molecular level. And that for the spirit to be able to do this, control our functions, influence our health and disease status, it has to be an intermediate that functions as a way of transmitting all that flux of information from the spirit to the body. So with that information, now I'm going to pass the baton to Rafael, and he can present a little bit more on the spiritual body. Take it away.
Thanks, Paulo. Thank you, everyone, for being watching, for being here. It's Saturday morning. Not so beautiful here in Boston, though, but hopefully somewhere where you are, it's more, it's prettier than here. But I want to then move on to this concept of the perispirit, which is something very interesting. The name Kardec gave, and it was approved by the spirits that were helping Kardec to develop the Spirit book. And the etymology of the word perispirit, it comes from like as you can see, here's like in a fruit, for example. Here's an avocado, and you have the germ, which would represent the spirit, which is the center, the nucleus. And then you have the perisperm, which is the area where we eat in the avocado, which is the perisperm, and this would be analogous to the perispirit. And then you have the out layer, which is like the hardest part of the fruit, and which is called physical body. So it's a very, I would say, perfect analogy that helps us to understand what this perispirit, the name, means. And as Paulo nicely described, it's an envelope. It's the I would say this component or the entity that communicates or interface between the spirit, which is something, it's called a flame or spark, and we don't know, have no idea what it is made of. And so it needs to, the spirit, which is immaterial, needs to interact with the physical body, which is a dense material component of substance. So it needs something in between to interface this communication. This is the perispirit. And the perispirit, as you can see, here is like a simplification of the spirit, which is this divine spark, as the spirit says. Maybe it's the best expression to tell us, what is what it could be. I mean, for us to have an idea. And there is, of course, the spirit, the spiritual, I mean, the mind, which is this the mental body, which is the way that the spirit, all our thinking, it forms like this mind, the mental body, but taking it apart to make it a little bit simpler, and then it's like you have here the perispirit, and the perispirit involving the spirit and connecting cell to cell to the body. And this is it's very important, because that's what it's gonna dictate our physical healthy or illness. and health or illness. So, and this is so Joao is asking something here. The spirits tell us that this in the spirit book that sensations are spread throughout the perispirit. Yes, so the mind body or the mental body is where we have all the sensations, all for all these other feelings that will eventually be spread out around the perispirit, and the perispirit will communicate with the body. We can talk more about that in the Q&A part, but what it is important to memorize and to understand of the perispirit, this is made from the cosmic fluid. This is what the spirit says is the constitution of all matter in the universe, not only on Earth. And by saying that, we need to understand that, as I point out here, down here below, it varies according to planets. So human beings living in Jupiter, for example, has a different type of perispirit, which is made from the fluid that constitutes that planet. So, and on Earth, this is the perispirit that we are formed, is based on what Earth provides us. And another thing is, like as Paulo said, it's something that should be, well, the spirit's called semi-material substance. I'm a little bit bothered about the semi-material, but this is a way that we can understand it better, because in fact there's nothing semi-material. It's either material or not. So, but the problem is, why can't we see it? It's just because it's a different vibration, it's different spectrum of the electromagnetic field, so our eyes cannot perceive it. But in fact, if it comes from the cosmic fluid, and the cosmic fluid is what made all the matter in the universe, the perispirit must be a matter as well, but it's a different sort of matter. And which, I mean, that's also when you read André Luiz's particularly books, you would see that when you are in the spiritual world, you feel like you are on Earth. I mean, it's the same feeling. So that many spirits that incarnate, especially suddenly, they would not realize they are dead because they feel the same kind of things that they were feeling when they were incarnated. So this suggests us that it is a material body, it's a material substance, but it's in a different spectrum. So we cannot perceive it in our world and incarnate it in this dense physical body. It also works as a mode for the physical body. So that's why many people, for example, when they have problems and birth problems, I would say, so that reflects a problem in the perispirit, which during the process of embryogenesis affects the genetic constitution of the body. And then you have this, for example, people that don't have an arm or a leg, or have all these changes in the mental state. And this is because the perispirit is somehow affected, and it's just transferring that information to the body. But also, it can happen throughout the life. And one of the most, I would say, the clearest example is the cancer, which is a change in the way that cells respond to this domesticated control of the spirit, and they become working by themselves, completely unaware what they should be doing. And that's also a problem that comes from the spirit and then was transferred to the perispirit and consequently transferred to the body, the physical body. And as I mentioned before, the perispirit connects cell to the physical body. And this is very important because the problems in the perispirit, if it's a problem, let's say in our gastric area, so then it would be eventually manifest as a disturb in your stomach or in your gut. So this is very important as well when you think about all the chakras, which are the name in Sanskrit that would mean wheels of force, which is all spread throughout the perispirit. And we know there's the 7 classic chakras, and which is very nicely also mentioned by André Luiz in the book Evolution into Words, I believe in the chapter 2. And he describes all these chakras and what are their functions. But this is the importance of being connected cell to cell. And the perispirit also record our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And that's why we transfer problems from one life to another. So we do something bad in this life, and this will eventually affect our perispirit, because we know in the spiritual book, the Spirit answered Kardec about the divine laws. Where are the divine laws in us? And they say it's in our consciousness. So if you somehow you affect the natural law or divine law, and this will eventually affect your perispirit, your spirit, obviously, and then your perispirit, and then sometimes we die with this guilt, and that's what it's transferred to the spiritual world, and then we're going to be suffering for a while in some regions that consist of low vibration energy, and eventually when you reincarnate, we transfer all that problems in the perispirit to the physical body. And so that's explained all of the, as I mentioned, the problems we see in people. You don't understand why they have those problems in their bodies, but it's definitely coming from another life. And again, these terms in the perispirit will reflect on the physical body. So, and in that sense, I like this picture here to explain a little bit better what happens. And this is, I believe, is the most important part of my talk here. And trying to, I hope I can make you understand, or make like it's a summary what it's in the evolution into words in terms of health and disease. So if you think about on the left side here, this is the perispirit, or the the spiritual body. And on the right side, it is the physical body. So imagine that we have, throughout our life, let's think about only this life. Let's forget a little bit about our previous life to make it a little bit clearer. And imagine that you develop throughout your life this sadness, hatred, things like you're hurt and you feel like really, you can't forgive someone that did something to you. So all this bad or energy or low vibration or energy will be accumulating in your perispirit. Of course, it's generated by the spirit that goes to the physical or to the mental body, and eventually goes to the perispirit. And in the perispirit, it's a very plastic, it's a very fluidic body, so it can retain things much faster. So that's why throughout our entire life, not entire life, I would say a good part of your life, when you have that anguish and that sadness, and as I mentioned, hatred, depression, things like that, it's not immediately, it will not immediately affect your physical body. So, and that's why there is this wall, if I can say that, in between, because this works like as a wall of transferring things from the perispirit to the physical body. Because the physical body is like dense matter. It's really hard to affect it immediately. And they just compare the dense matter constitution of the physical body to this subtle constitution of the perispirit. And then you see that the perispirit is affected much earlier. But if you don't resolve the problem, if you don't forgive, if you don't try to be happy, if you don't try to understand others and to live according to the gospel, to what Jesus told us. So what happens is that this wall, this barrier, will become weaker and weaker, and the disease, or this bad fluid, the bad energy that is accumulating in your perispirit, will be transferred to your physical body. And as I mentioned, this is a classic way or a mechanism by which cancer develops. Let's say you have this problem in your some areas of your body. Let's say, as I mentioned before, in your stomach or in your gut, feelings are usually very related to your gut. That's why we usually say you have butterflies in our stomach when you are emotional or anxious or things like that. So then what happened is that slowly we begin to affect your gastrointestinal area, and those cells that were really domesticated, working really nicely in harmony with the whole tissue, the whole organ, will just lose this. It's like there are holes in the perispirit, or holes that is going to be made transferred to this physical body, and the cells will eventually becoming disorganized, and they will begin to dictate their own destiny, and they will grow and grow and grow and grow, and they will differentiate, which constitute the major part of the cancer. It's called dysplasia in a more formal word. And then these cells will become completely different, and they will eventually get into blood cells, blood vessels, and spread throughout the body, which is called metastasis. But then we try to treat that cancer, treat. We are very, very depressed and sad because we have cancer. It's like we're going to die. But we need to learn from this. And we need to learn from this disease that something was wrong long time ago. And now it's time to fix it, because your body may die, but you are not going to die. So you can choose either finish this with your body here, or you can move it to your spiritual world and still be suffering there. So that's how we need to learn, because in the end, our life here is just a second, maybe a minute. It's like a split of it's like a sort of short time if you compare to eternity. And this is what we have to think about disease. Maybe it's a good way to say, well, what is this causing? What is the reason I'm having any sort of disease? And that's a point that I want to finish by saying that the same way that our perispirit can reflect very fast, very quickly, all these problems that are originating from our spirit, I'd also say that it can also recover very fast. So the best thing to prevent disease and to maintain our health is to always be living in a good way, in a good vibe, happy, forgiving. And because then any sort of hurt or sadness you have throughout your day or throughout the month or the year, it's affecting your perispirit, but it's not affecting your physical body yet because of this barrier of density. But then you can immediately think, well, okay, I must forgive that person. I mean, we are all in the same boat and we are here to evolve together. So let's just forgive and let's be happy. Let's not worry, as that music says, be happy. And then that song, right? And then we can immediately change that constitution of that bad energy in our perispirit, transform it into good energy, which is going to go to your physical body anyways. So you have time. Let's just start thinking about that. We have time to change things before we get sick. So with that, I want to finish this and open for discussion and for Q&A later on.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Rafael. I think we can maybe touch a couple of points before we go to Q&A. Is that okay?
Yeah,
because
sure.
I think you raised a bunch of interesting points there. The last one, for example, I think the diseases are always trying to tell us something.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have to ask ourselves, right?
Yeah.
What exactly this disease is trying to tell me? Because again, we're not physical bodies. Right? Fundamentally,
Exactly.
we are spirits, and the physical body is just a reflection of our spirit. So if the physical body has a problem, we have the problem in the spirit as well, and the physical body can tell us what those problems could be. It's very hard, I know. It's not an easy process. But every time I think that we are, suffering because of a disease, it's very important to us, I think, to ask ourselves those questions. Why is that? Why do I have this right now? And what this disease is trying to tell me? What should I work on right now to try to, maybe not cure that disease, because sometimes the disease is actually the cure for the spirit, like Emmanuel says in that same book, O Consolador. But how can I live better with this? But let's maybe go back, unless you have something else to talk about this, to say about this. Let's maybe go back to the beginning, because I think you touched on a couple of interesting points there, like that the spiritual body is semi-material. And you said something that is true. We don't know the constitution of the spiritual body. We don't know, we know the spiritual body, the physical body, we know the constitution of that. We understand all the atoms, all the molecules. We can study all of that, but we cannot do the same thing with the spiritual body. And you said something that for me is really relevant, that is semi-material. And in a bunch of books from André Luiz, and also there is a book that I think there is no translation as well, that is called The Perispirit. It's from a guy named Zalmiro Zimmermann. I think it's only in Portuguese as well. So in both this book and also in some of André Luiz's books, like Evolution in 2 Words and others, we understand that the perispirit is actually a combination of multiple layers. And I think that's really important to understand how this works, because as I said before, the spirit is very immature. So there's no way that the spirit can, touch our biology, can have influence in the matter. So the intermediate, to be able to do this, to make that connection with the spiritual world, with the immaterial dimension and the biological dimension, the physical dimension, it has to have the two. It has to have the two properties. That's why I think we call that semi-material. And when we look at the layers, and I hope I can explain that in a way that is going to facilitate the understanding. The layers, think about this, the perispirit like an onion, for example. Okay, the center of the onion is the body. Okay, is the physical body. The next layer is the first layer of the perispirit. We call that in Portuguese dupletérico, or I think the translation for that is ethereal or etheric double, something like that. So that etheric double is very close to the body. It's very attached to the body. And we know that this part is actually attached to the body through the production of energy in our cells, in our mitochondria. And we call that the vital body or the ectoplasm, right? So that part is very connected to the body, to the physical body. So I guess that the constitution of that layer should be more like matter than a spirit. Does that make sense? As you move out of the onion, the center of the onion, and you go closer to the mind and close to the spirit, those layers become more and more and more immature. Okay, so the perispirit in the spiritual body is the combination of all those layers, some that are closer to the body and that are more, matter-like, although again, we cannot touch that and we cannot see that and we cannot study that. But that's from André Luiz's books, and that's from Zalmiro Zimmermann book as well. We have this layer that is very close to the body. Then we have the next two layers that we call the astral body and the causal body as well. Those two layers that form the actual perispirit, because that's where we have all the memories in the perispirit. That's the two layers that we actually bring with us after death. That's why we call that the astral body. And then on top of that, we have something that we cannot explain very well. André Luiz cannot explain very well, which is the mental body. In the book Evolution in 2 Words, it says that the mental body is the outer layer of the perispirit, and it's a reflection of the spirit. But he says that he's not able to understand that completely, right? And we cannot understand that completely here as well. But we know that there are all those different layers. The mental body is closer to the spirit. The mental body is a reflection of the spirit. So that's why Kardec says that the body and the spiritual body is seized by thought, because the first layer is seized by thought. It's what our spirit is reflecting. and forming that mental body. The mental bodies then form the causal and the astral body, and then the etheric double, which is very close to the body and connect to the body through the vital body or the ectoplasm. So I think those are, for me, interesting things and important things to understand when we talk about the spiritual body, all of these different layers, because all of them have different functions. The nature is different. And again, we don't know exactly the nature of all of them, but they are very different. Some are more dense, some are closer to matter, and some are closer to the spiritual world. That's why these multiple layers together, they can connect the two worlds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important point. That it's really hard to we can keep talking and postulating things for the entire day about the mental body and the spirit. Well, the truth is we don't know, and there are more important things for us to know now, which is being better people. Because as Emmanuel said, I think it's also in the book of Causal. I think that's going to be the translation of the book. We need to have two wings, one of the wisdom and one of the love. And we are growing in wisdom, but our love wing is really short, and we can't take off like that. But the point is, it is important, I mean, at least for me, to understand how these things work in terms of disease, because it always get me thinking, how can we fix this? How can we prevent disease? Obviously we're going to die, but how can you live a better life? That's the point. How can we avoid diseases that it was not planned in our in the planning of our reincarnation, and a lot of stupid things, a lot of mistakes we commit in this life, we could avoid it. And unfortunately, for many of us, we learn it a bit late, when it's already there. But when things are already there, we just need to accept and move on, and understand that you're going to keep living, and there is hope. Always there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And again, I believe that there are going to be many questions regarding that. Where we're living now, the pandemics, what this is happening, how can these microorganisms or microbes get into some people and to others not? Like in the same house, the same household, some people die, some people don't even get sick. How can you explain if the virus, for example, the SARS-CoV-2 is the same, it's there? And it's even in Brazil, when you have these outbreaks of dengue, for example. I remember that dengue is transmitted by a mosquito, and some people are there in the same household. Some of them get really sick, some of them don't get sick. Why the mosquito choose to bite you and not the other one? So it's like all these things that seems like silly. We need to keep thinking about that. So it's a really beautiful area, I would say. I don't know if you can open to the questions. I mean, it's maybe
well, I think what you just said before we actually go to the question, it's very interesting, because the record of thoughts and all the imperfection of the spirit, we're going to keep that in our perispirits, right? It's going to be reflected in perispirit, in those two layers that I said, the astral body and the causal body as well, that records all the thoughts and all the experiences that we had in the past. And we know, from different books that according to everything that we experienced in the past, and all those memories that we carry with us in the perispirit, those things can result in disease, either because it's atonement, like karmas, for example, negative karmas that we bring with us in our record, or because of non-vigilant mental states, for example, during this incarnation. Is something that we don't bring with us, but that changes the perispirit as well, psychological and social stresses, and things like that, external influences from the environment that can change the perispirit as well. And I think one important thing, to go back to what you said about infectious disease, about dengue, for example, we can have the same discussion about COVID, because some people, they contract the virus, so they're infected with the virus, but they're asymptomatic. There's actually most people, they're asymptomatic. Some people are going to develop symptoms, and most of them are going to have mild symptoms only. Some are going to have more severe, and just a small fraction are actually going to the hospital with pneumonia. The problem is that that small fraction was, in absolute numbers, were so large because there's so many people infected that it was a very big and large pandemic, and a big problem for the healthcare system because of that. So if we have all these, all these memories, if we have all this, like you showed nicely in your last slide, all those points, of imperfections in the perispirit that can translate into problems in the physical body, and we carry that with us. We carry that to the next lives as well, because we're going to be carrying that perispirit with us after death. There's something that André Luiz in Evolution in 2 Words talk about, and he calls that the morbid predispositions. So when I saw that picture that you showed, it reminded me of that, of the morbid predisposition. So all those black dots that you showed there, he calls that the morbid predispositions. And each one of us, we have different morbid predispositions according to our experiences, according to everything that we bring with us in our spirits. And so that's why some people can live in the same household and be exposed to dengue virus, but not all of us are going to develop that, because the morbid predispositions are different, right?
Exactly.
And we could think about the same thing for COVID as well.
Yeah. Well, there's several interesting questions I'm seeing here in the chat.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for such an interesting explanation. I mean, and I really enjoy the fact that both of you referred, to the work, to codification, works by André Luiz Emmanuel, very rich. And so we are ready for questions and answers. Let's read the first one.
Yep.
You speak of the harmony between the spirit and the mind take place in our spirit. What is the role of the perispirit? I thought the perispirit would be the one creating the experience of the body.
Do you want to take this one? Go ahead.
For me, well, I think the question is like the harmony between the spirit and the mind take place in our spirit. So our spirit, we are the spirit. So we are a little bit confused when you say my spirit. No, my body. We are the spirit. So we create everything. So what is the role of the perispirit? So the perispirit, the major role, I would say, is to interface between immaterial spirit, which we don't know what it is, and the physical body, which we do know what it is. So the major point is this connection between spirit and physical body. So what was the last part of the question? So I thought the perispirit would be one creating the experience of the body. In fact, the perispirit is just transferring things. It doesn't create anything because we create it. So we are not the perispirit either. We are not the physical body. We are the spirit. So the spirit creates everything. And this goes to your perispirit, and then it affects your body. But this is obviously in a way that it's really hard to separate, to split them when you are incarnated. And it's even harder to split the perispirit and the spirit. But the perispirit eventually will go away when the spirit becomes a Christ, for example. And then we can't talk about it. So who am I to talk about a Christ? I have no idea even about myself. So, but that's the thing, the perispirit, it doesn't create. And that goes to another question, if you allow me. It's like Celso actually mentioned that the perispirit matter. So how come matter can hold memory? So we always and often say that the perispirit holds memory, but this is the way to make things simpler. The perispirit doesn't generate the memory. So everything is in our spirit. But when the perispirit is around, of course, and when we're incarnated, the perispirit has this fascinating function of transfer whatever's in the spirit to areas of our brain, particularly the hippocampus and the cortex, that will tell and form this memory. So the brain is the organ that is the organ of manifestation of the spirit. So, and then the memory comes from the spirit, but the perispirit, because it's so connected to the spirit, we can actually distinguish it very well. But of course, it holds the memory because it's connected to the spirit. If one could split both perispirit and the spirit, the perispirit wouldn't have any memory because it's just another body, and the spirit is the one that holds and generates everything. But it's hard to split. Hopefully it's understandable what I just said.
I think it was very clear. Thank you. Next question. Let's take a look at the next question. Are there clinical applications of this medical understanding? Specifically, can an infection be treated without the use of antibiotics?
No. No, infections need to be treated with antibiotics. So just remember one thing that I said before. As incarnated spirits, we are living in multiple dimensions. And when we are sick, we need to take care of all those multiple dimensions, including the biological one. And especially in an infection, an acute infection, for example, we really need to take care of the biological component, because if we don't do that, the body is going to die. So we definitely need to treat infections with antibiotics when we have to. But we can do other things at the same time. We can, go through the disease in a way that we're not going to make things worse than they are, right? But definitely we need to take care of the biological component as well.
Thank you for clarifying. There's a lot of confusion about that. You hear a lot of people say, hey, I don't need I don't need to get vaccinated because I can take care of it using my mind. So your explanation about taking care of the multiple dimensions was very appropriate.
As far as I know, we cannot produce antibodies specific to microbes just using our minds. We need to present the antigen to the immune system to train the immune system. So this is very important. It's something that we need to stress, actually, because sometimes, I hear that a lot as well, that, you can treat everything in our bodies in this incarnation with just with our minds and thoughts. Well, we can definitely live better lives if we have positive thoughts, and if we can, control better our minds, because the minds are actually controlling ourselves. But if we have a biological problem, well, it's going to be hard to control that just with the mind. We need to control the biological portion as well. And that goes with antibiotics and vaccines.
We are not Jesus to make it possible to do all these things. I mean, we don't know how to manipulate the fluid yet. So for now, we have to use what we have.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Very good explanation. What role does genetics, DNA, play in diseases, parents' chromosomes, and how spirit interacts with influence genetics? Interesting.
So genetics, it's something definitely you have to take into account. If you read the book, I don't know the name in English for that, but André Luiz, I believe it's Missionários da Luz. Someone can help me with the translation.
Missionaries of the Light.
Missionaries of the Light. Okay, thank you. So you see the reincarnation of Segismundo, one of the characters there, and it is really interesting that when you have the spirits which are more evolved than us, they will help to select even the spermatozoid that is going to be going to fecundate, is that word, the eggs, and or fertilize the eggs. And it's interesting that he also mentioned that the eggs actually, the things of the spermatozoids, there is a fight between spermatozoids. It's actually a race between the spermatozoids, and randomly one will reach and fertilize the egg. So that's not true. Actually, the egg is full of magnetic energy that attracts the right spermatozoid. That will be the one necessary to fertilize that egg and generate all genetic predisposition for that body. And very often, the spirits coordinating that reincarnatory process will help the process of this chase and dispute among the spermatozoids. And the genetic is actually an important thing that will dictate your the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, how tall or short you're going to be, things like that. But which is becoming more and more important now in science is the epigenetic modification, something that happens above the genes, which does not come from your parents. But even some diseases that are critical, that we know there is problems in the genetic constitution, is that like this: when the spirit is in the mother before even the fertilization. So the spirit that's changing its format, like this perispirit is becoming shortened and shortened, and it's attached to I would say the spiritual body of the mother before actually the pregnancy occurs. So, and then when it's adjusted there, then it comes the point where the fertilization happens, and the spirit, of course, this is automatic. It becomes to change or to control the genetic development of that egg and the embryo, and some, depending on the problems or this morbid, how you say that, Paulo, morbid predisposition. So you're gonna start to affect this on that area of the body that is being formed. So then you have this malformation of some areas. There's some genes that are missing and cause some very well-known genetic disease and things like that. So it is important to consider the genetic predisposition, yes, because that's predetermined by the spirits controlling the reincarnatory process. But it's also important to understand what's going to happen later on, which is mostly involving epigenetic modification. It's not genetic anymore.
So it's interesting that you said that about epigenetics, because I think one important thing to tell about genes is that they are really important, of course. They're part of the organization, but they don't explain organization itself. Okay. So as Rafael nicely explained that, genes are sometimes going to be involved in the pathogenesis of a bunch of different diseases because they have mutations or because there are pieces of the DNA that are missing entirely, like large chunks of DNA missing. And they're going to be related with infection or with disease. But again, the genes are there in that way, in that organization, missing a piece or with a mutation, because there is a correlate to that in the perispirit. There is a correlate to that modification in the DNA in our perispirit that is telling the body what has to happen with this particular kind of cells, for example. So genes, just to summarize this, genes are just a blueprint. They're not making us. They're not telling us what to do. The information comes from the outside, inside. So the influx of information is from the spirit to the body, and not from the nucleus of the cell, from the genes. Because we thought that in science for a long time, that the genes were going to explain everything. When we started the genome project, for example, everybody was really excited because we're like, well, now we're going to understand all the disease. Now we're going to understand how we can form the human bodies. And then when we finished the human project, the human genome project, we found that our genome has about 23,000 genes. That's not much than a fruit fly. And that's less than a corn, for example. Corns have more genes in their cells than we do. But when we look at the number of proteins that we can make with all those genes, it goes from 23,000 to almost 400,000. So that's 20 times more proteins, because we can use the same gene to make different proteins by a mechanism that is called splicing. We take the messenger RNA and then we modify the messenger RNA from the same gene to make different stuff. So we make 400,000. And all the control, the environmental control in the cells that we call epigenetic, it's telling the genomes what to do and how to produce those, around 400,000 proteins from only 23,000 genes. So the genes, they have the recipe to make all those proteins, but the control of them and the information, telling them what to produce, when, and how, it's coming from outside. It's coming from the spirit and from the spiritual body. So they are part of the organization because they're producing all those proteins that are important for their structure proteins, their enzymes, their hormones. They're basically, the chemical communication of our body and the chemical structure of our bodies as well. But the information comes from the outside, which genes we're going to express, when, how we're going to modify the same genes to make different proteins. That control is not coming from the nucleus, it's coming from outside.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen, for a very enlightening explanation. So, good morning. Question. In times of Allan Kardec, scientists knew about all this relationship between body and mind or spirit?
Well, actually, it was not very clearly, as we know now. I mean, a lot of this knowledge came with André Luiz. So he was the spirit responsible to bring us all this more detailed information about the spiritual world. So at the time of Allan Kardec, there was even before Allan Kardec, there was like René Descartes, for example. He thought about pineal gland as the center of the soul and things like that. So those people began to speculate what was going on. They knew, all smart people in the world, we know there is something beyond it. I mean, it's not just matter. Something is going on. And the scientists, which, Paul and I are part of this community, we are now understanding more and more, or thinking more and more about these things in a way to explain all of this relationship between body and mind and spirit in a way that people can understand and can use it for their own goodness. So I would say that would be very hard to know all the details we have now. There's a lot of things in the 19th century that was happening. It was the Illuminism. And that's the era where a lot of people a lot of spirits were coming to Earth to bring us a lot of scientific information about chemistry, about physics. It came about biology, of course, evolution. Einstein with the relativity theory, and all the other guys with the electromagnetic forces and all these things that were just paving the way for us and for spirits like André Luiz to dump this lot of information on us about science, and knowledge. So yeah, that's would be my point of view here.
Okay. Oh, a question from our friend from Jusara, the president of the U.S. Spiritist Federation. By the way, she's going to be with us a little bit later to do some to make some closing remarks. How can we stop the damaging that is already in the process of taking place? Can we do more than just aggravating it more?
Just love. That's it. We need to love more. Paulo, you can.
Well, I think definitely, I think love is the way that we're gonna heal our souls. I have no doubt. I think, an effort to evolve morally, I think would be very helpful when the damage is already in place. That happens a lot with us. A lot of us, when we get sick, we start to reevaluate our lives, everything that we've done until that moment, and that sometimes modify people a lot, especially severe illnesses, and sometimes terminal illnesses as well. People really change the way that they think about life, the way that they think about others, and they start, in my opinion, they start in that moment the cure of their spirits, right? And so I agree with you that moral transformation is the only way that we're going to cure our spirits, and love, as Jesus taught us, is the way of doing this.
Perfect. Are diseases like
Flu?
Flu, like this, like flu and headaches, related to the spirit as well?
Well, yes, it's related, but it's not necessarily caused by the spirit. What usually happens is that you are in a predisposition way. It depends. It can change. It's not necessarily you were born with that. But let's say this is a very simple example. When you are stressed for something in our jobs or something at home, you usually get the cold-like symptom a few days later. And that's because we say, well, your immunity, your resistance just dropped down because of that. And that's true. I mean, when you're stressed, for example, your cortisol levels raise, and then cortisol is the most potent anti-inflammatory in the world. So it's going to shut down your immune system, and then it's going to make viruses and bacteria and whatever microbes growth in your body. So we cannot blame everything for the spirit, but of course, André Luiz also in some of his books, I forgot which one, also mentioned that when he was going from going to a work he was doing on Earth, he was looking from the top when he was getting down to Earth, and he saw some black energy like masses in the community in a big city he was going to, and then his instructor said, well, this is our masses of microbes. And you can see that it's closer to one or the other person because that person is attracting it somehow. And how can you attract it? It's based on how you're thinking, your moral issues. So that's something that, can attract virus that cause flu, that cause COVID, and any other sort of cold or infectious disease, I would say. So you are part of it for sure. You're part of it, but it's not something necessarily you were born with it, and that it says that in 2021 you're going to have an influenza virus, you're going to be in the hospital for 5 days. No, that's not, it doesn't come with you. It's just something that, well, at that period of time, unfortunately, you were going through an emotional stress, some problems, you affected your body, because the same way that the perispirit affect your physical body, the physical body affect your perispirit. It's like a constant change. So the physical body can definitely affect your perispirit, make you more, ready or able to get those diseases, and it's going to go there.
So we mentioned before that the perispirit is semi-fluidic, and because of that, it's very plastic. So it's important to mention that as well, that, although we're going to bring a lot of memories with us in our perispirit, and some of them maybe we're not going to be able to cure and to resolve just with in one incarnation and just with our moral transformation. But some, I think we do. And because it's very plastic, I don't like to think about those things that they're deterministic, because in fact, they're not. We have that ability to change a lot of things in our perispirit. Some of them we're not going to be able to change. And then the problem is ours. It's not because, some sort of higher power is determining that we have to have this specific disease or this specific problem. That's with us. And because the perispirit is semi-material and very plastic, I think, there's a lot of things that we can change during the reincarnation and avoid a couple of problems. And it's also important to remember that a lot of those diseases, there are multiple factors that need to come together for the disease to happen, especially infectious disease, because there's a lot of talk between the neural system, corticoids, the endocrine system with the immune system, and also the amount of microbes that are going to enter our body. If there's not enough amount of microbes, we don't get sick. Those microbes need to have specific factors that we call virulence factors as well. If they don't, they're not able to cause this. So there's a lot of things in play, not only one specific factor. But for sure, as we mentioned before, we do have morbid predispositions in our perispirit. And that's why André Luiz called predisposition, because they, again, not deterministic. They came predisposed to a specific disease. But, at the end of the day, we are in control of that. I would recommend the person who asked that question, I cannot see the name anymore here, to read the 2 final chapters of Evolution in 2 Words. So that's a book that was Janaína. Janaína, there is a book that was written by Chico Xavier, dictated by the spirit André Luiz. It's called Evolution in 2 Words. The last two chapters are called morbid predispositions. We talk about that a lot. And the last one is very interesting for your question because the name is microbial invasion. And Andrea talks about that a little bit, how the morbid predispositions, or those marks that we have in the perispirit, can sometimes cause ruptures in between the perispirit and the body, modify the structure of the body, and predispose to microbial invasions.
Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen, for such great clarification. We have our last question. Perispirit is matter. How can matter hold memory?
Well, I think I just mentioned that before, right? It's like it's a way of the spirit. You know, the perispirit is it's always connected to the body and to the spirit, and the spirit generates that. And there is someone here, I think Freddie, I just reading here concerning to, and he gives a nice explanation as well. He said, I think that the perispirit's like a storage, like a computer, all memories archived. So it's something like that. We don't know how it happens, but the fact is, if one could be able to split the perispirit from the spirit, which is not possible, then the memories would go away. What is the memory? What are memories? So it's not just chemical. It's something else that comes from feelings, that come from emotions, and some experiences, that it's all based on the spirit. The perispirit is a way to carry that from the spirit to the body and to some specific areas of the brain that are responsible for memory.
Yeah. I think it's the image that I always have in my mind of spirit and perispirit is like, if I were able to take my spirit and put that in front of a mirror, the image that I see in the mirror is my perispirit. Unfortunately, we cannot see that. But the perispirit is just a reflection of our spirit. So the memories, everything it's actually in the spirit, right? But because the perispirit is a reflection and expression of the spirit, we do have layers there that hold memories as well. But I would say that the hard drive, it's the
like
spirit.
a memory foam pillow. I like that one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. I do like that analogy. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And here's Jusara. Hi, Jusara.
Hey, hi, how are you doing?
Hello.
Excellent. Jusara is going to say some final words for us before she says the final prayer.
Okay, first of all, let me start by thanking Rafael and Paulo for the excellent presentation. I'm sure you gave us so much food for thought, and it's so incredible to hear that. About all the aspects of spiritism and every literature that was mentioned, how we have to go and read them or revisit them, because those books, the literature that we have so far, have been a tremendous help for us to understand, and even in the scope of this medical field and understanding all the what happens. And I think it became so clear how at the end of the day it's all about how we do behave, how we do conduct our lives, the impact that it's going to provoke on our physical health, emotional, and spiritual, for sure. Also, I would like to thank Glaucio for being an excellent host, and I wanted to tell you just a few words. This is the last live of the year. I think you all agree that it was an excellent one, so we will be thinking and studying them for the next 2 years before we resume with our lives every Saturday at 11, as we have been doing for the past 2 years. We started with the pandemics. We were not so sure whether we were going to be able to do that, to have so many, people, all the friends, all the guest speakers that were here that did an amazing job. And we have all that in the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube channel and Facebook, if you wanted to go there and listen to them again. we have been having the support of all the members of the United States Spiritist Federation, and not only in giving us the talks, in presenting wonderful work here every Saturday. We have been having the amazing work of our friends Glaucio, Marcia, Peter, Tanya, myself, my husband Daniel. No, Daniel is not my husband; it's my husband João. That is behind the scenes now, but Danielle Santos and all the others that have been, working hard. Laura with the marketing, and all of the United States Spiritist Federation board also. So we hope it has been a good work for all of you as well. We think that spreading this word into the English language is much more than just the just for today. We know that this is going to be there stored. I myself, I hope that, I don't know, 50 years or 30 years from now, I don't know, when I'm back, I will go and find this United States Spiritist Federation YouTube channel and see, oh my God, look at these people. They did very good work at the time. Maybe the technical resources were not so good, but the content is really what matters. So this is why we are doing that, to have this registered and to have this such an important part of our lives. And here I'm talking about immortal lives, registered and be there for everyone to access. And we know that so many other countries that do not have this access because of the language, but many of them can really understand and look for material into English. So we wish you all a wonderful holiday, and we will be back next year, not only with the Saturday talks, because now you became ambitious. You have been cheering us up so much, and the feedback we have been receiving, it has been so wonderful that we have decided as well to start online course study about initiation to Spiritism that is going to be starting on January 23rd in 2022. So it's going to be on Sundays at 10 a.m. And it's going to be there in case you cannot join the live one, but it's going to be there as well in our YouTube channel and Facebook. So everyone, thank you so much. And in the spirit of gratitude and remembering all the guest speakers that we cannot name, the ones that we have been having. We already had more than 70 lives during the past 2 years, almost 80 lives, I think. And but all of you that have been contributing and giving your time and putting your effort. And again, thank you so much, Rafael. It was really wonderful to hear from you, and Paulo that has been it was here before, but the two of you together, we really wanted to hear more. Okay, so let's plan something for next year. And this is a spirit of happy holidays and gratitude. We would like to demonstrate our gratitude as well to our Heavenly Father and all the good spirits. We know that this work would not be possible if it were not for the help and support and guidance and motivation and being there for us when we think that we cannot do it, that this time we are not going to be able to cope with everything that we are going through, and they are there helping us. So we are very, very grateful. Because we understand the impact that the daily occurrences have been happening in the life of each and every one of us. And remembering and honoring the work and guidance of our brother and Master Jesus Christ, we have to offer guidance, comfort, our helping hand in each and every way that we can do it. So let us pray that regardless of our current situation, we can still find in our hearts joy and hope to continue and to become successful in this lifetime, working on behalf of our spiritual involvement. May all the homes, each and every one, feel the blessings, the presence, the embrace, and the loving heart of our Heavenly Creator. And may we all feel peace today and forever. So be it.